You are sitting in a folding beach chair with a strip of duct tape across the left armrest, and 40 feet away, a man is filming himself climbing onto a 62-foot yacht he doesn't fully own yet. Same beach, same afternoon, same ocean. He has 340,000 followers watching him hold up a glass of champagne. You have a warm can of sparkling water and sand in your sandals, and you are worth more than he will ever admit to owing. Nobody on this beach knows your name. That's not an accident. That is the entire point. The chair is 11 years old. You bought it for $19 at a hardware store the same month you signed the papers on a business that, at the time, was worth less than the yacht that man is currently financing. You didn't replace the chair when the money came. You replaced the tape. This is the first thing people get wrong about wealth. They think it announces itself. They think if you have it, you show it, the way a Doberman shows its teeth. But real money, the kind that doesn't need anyone's permission to exist, tends to look almost apologetic. It wears the same jacket for 6 years. It drives the car until the car is done, not until the car is embarrassing. You are, according to a spreadsheet that exactly 4 people have ever seen, the 7th richest person in a city of just under 900,000, not the 7th most visible. Not the 7th most photographed, the 7th richest. Nobody would guess it from the chair. Nobody would guess it from the flip-flops either, or the sunscreen that's the drugstore brand, or the fact that you drove yourself here instead of having anyone drive you anywhere. There is no entourage. There is no assistant holding a cooler. There is a man, a chair, and a can of sparkling water going warm in the sun, and every single detail of that image was chosen, not by accident, but the way you choose anything you've had 11 years to get right. The beach doesn't know. The beach never knows. That's the whole design. There is a magazine, a glossy regional business quarterly, that publishes a wealthiest 50 list every March. You have never appeared on it, not once in 11 years. This isn't luck, it's structure. Your holdings sit behind 3 LLCs and a trust administered out of a small office 2 states away, managed by a woman named Renata Cho, who has filed your returns since your business was worth $340,000, and who now manages a net worth that recently crossed $412 million. Renata knows the real number. Your wife, Marisol, knows the real number. Your accountant on the operating side, a methodical man named Owen Restrepo, knows pieces of it. That's the entire list. 3 people, and you. The man on the yacht, his name is Wes Calloway, and you've met him twice, once at a Chamber of Commerce mixer and once at a gas station, believes he is wealthier than you. He has said so, indirectly, at both encounters. Wes has a Rolex, a leased Lamborghini Urus, and a company that carries $2.1 million in short-term debt against $600,000 in liquid assets. You have a $19 chair and no debt at all. This is the fork the whole story runs on. 2 men on the same beach, in the same tax bracket by appearance, separated by a gap so wide it would be almost comedic if it weren't also the entire architecture of how this city actually works. 2 paths, running side by side, invisible to anyone who isn't looking for them. One path spends to be seen, the other spends to be free. From 40 feet away, on this sand, they look like the same path. They have never been the same path. Here is the math nobody explains to you at 22, so let's walk it out loud. Wes bought the Urus for $94,000, with $11,000 down, financed at 7.9% over 6 years. His monthly payment is $1,410. Insurance on a vehicle in that class runs another $310 a month in this state. So before he drives it anywhere, the car costs him $1,720 a month, $20,640 a year, to own the appearance of money. 11 years ago, you took a number close to that, $18,000, the leftover cash after your first real profitable year, and instead of a down payment, you put it into an index fund and left it completely alone. At an average annual return of roughly 10%, compounding untouched for 11 years, that $18,000 becomes just under $50,700. Not dramatic, not a headline, but it's real, and it's yours, and it never once made a payment to a bank. Now scale that decision across 11 years of similar choices, reinvested profits instead of leased status symbols, savings, and a few private business acquisitions Renata structured quietly, and you get from $18,000 to $412 million, not through one genius move, but through refusing, year after year, to do what Wes is doing on that yacht right now. Normal is not the same as free. Wes is not poor. Wes is leveraged to look like you, without being you. And the terrifying part, the part nobody puts in the caption, is that from 40 feet away, on this beach, in these clothes, the two of you are indistinguishable. Walk the math one more step. If Wes had taken that same $20,640 a year, the cost of owning the appearance of money, and put it into the same index fund instead, for the same 11 years, he'd be sitting on roughly $415,000 today, not $412 million. Nobody's pretending this is the same order of magnitude, but it would have been his. It would have been quiet and boring and entirely his, instead of belonging, in practice, to a bank that can call the loan whenever it wants to. Leasing your image is not a strategy, it's a habit wearing a suit. There is a version of your life where you took the yacht instead of the chair. You know this because you almost did. 9 years ago, flush off the sale of your first company for $2.6 million before tax. You sat in a boat showroom with a broker named Colton Vance. No relation to nothing, just a name you remember because he wore a linen blazer in February, and you were 40 minutes from signing. Colton had already started drafting the paperwork for a 44-footer. You didn't sign. You went home and told Marisol you almost bought a boat you'd use 4 times a year, and she asked you a question that ended the conversation. Whose life would that boat be for? Not yours. It would have been for people who happened to be standing on the dock when you arrived. That's the trade nobody tells you about. Flexing isn't spending money. It's spending money you'll never get back, on people who were never going to remember it past Tuesday, in exchange for a feeling that lasts about as long as the photo does. Colton called you twice that week, trying to close it. You still remember the number he quoted for annual upkeep, dockage, insurance, winterizing, a part-time captain for the busy months. $61,000 a year, before you ever left the marina. That's $61,000 a year to store a feeling. You ran the number against what $61,000 a year, reinvested instead, would become over a decade at a modest return, and the answer, just under $1.05 million, ended the daydream faster than Marisol's question did. You never bought the boat. 2 years later, you bought the company that built the marina's competitor instead, for less than the boat would have cost you to maintain over its lifetime. Nobody photographed that. It never needed to be photographed. It just needed to work. Privacy has a price too, but it's the opposite kind. Because your name isn't on a list, nobody has ever tried to sue you for money you don't technically owe. Nobody has ever cornered you at a school fundraiser to pitch you on a crypto project. Your kids' friends don't know. Your contractor doesn't know. When your roof needed replacing 2 years ago, you paid the same $14,200 everyone else on the block paid, instead of the wealthy client markup Renata has watched happen to 2 of her other clients whose names did make that magazine. Being invisible isn't just modesty, it's armor. There's a second, quieter kind of security too, the kind that shows up in the mail instead of on a doorstep. Because your name has never touched that magazine, you've never received one of the wealth verification letters Renata says arrive at her other clients' houses twice a year, fishing for estate planning business from firms that bought a mailing list built off public filings. You've never had a contractor round up an estimate because the truck in the driveway looked new. You've never had a distant cousin resurface after a decade of silence the way one resurfaced for a client of Renata's the month after his company's IPO made the local news. None of that has ever happened to you, and the reason is almost embarrassingly simple. Nobody knew there was anything to come looking for. Here's what your actual week looks like, in case the folding chair confused you. Tuesday morning, you drove your 2016 pickup, 141,000 miles, still on the original transmission, to the same diner you've gone to since before the first company existed, and you had the same $9 breakfast, and the woman behind the counter, Denise Okafor, has no idea what you're worth, because you tip well and consistently, and never talk about money, and that combination reads as regular guy, not rich guy trying to seem normal. Your house is worth $890,000. It is not the biggest house in your neighborhood. That belongs to a dermatologist 2 doors down who financed his at 90% loan to value. Yours is paid off entirely, which means your single largest monthly expense is $6,100 in property tax and insurance, paid once a year, and otherwise you spend almost nothing on the roof over your head. You bought one genuinely expensive thing in the last decade, a mattress, $3,400. Because you calculated once that you'll spend roughly 26,000 hours of your remaining life on it, and decided that was worth paying for. Nobody has ever noticed the mattress. Nobody notices the things that are actually working. This is value-based spending, and it looks nothing like luxury. It looks like a truck with dents in it and a mattress nobody sees. The power of no is the other half of this machine. 18 months ago, a group of local investors, including, awkwardly Wes, approached you to co-sign on a strip mall development that needed $1.4 million in bridge financing. It would have taken 4 days of paperwork and returned, on paper, an annualized 22%. You said no. You didn't explain why. You didn't need to. That's what the cushion is for. Not the buying power, the declining power. 6 months later, the anchor tenant backed out and the deal collapsed, taking $600,000 of Wes's short-term debt down with it. You never mentioned it to him. He never asked why you'd passed. Freedom was sitting 6 feet away from him at that same meeting, in a chair he didn't recognize as expensive, saying no without a single follow-up question. People confuse this life with cheapness, and it isn't the same thing at all. Frugal is refusing to buy the mattress. Wealthy and quiet is buying the mattress and never mentioning the price. The difference is intention, not restriction. You spend freely, on things that compound, on time, on privacy, on your kid's education fund, which currently sits at $780,000 across 3 accounts none of their friends will ever hear about. You just don't spend to be witnessed. And the boring truth underneath all of it, this took 11 years of almost nothing happening. No windfall, no single dramatic year, just Tuesday after Tuesday of the same choices, compounding quietly while everyone was watching people who looked richer. Ask most people to picture a wealthy man's morning, and they picture a private chef, a driver, a call with a wealth manager, about positioning for Q3. Your actual morning, most days, involves making your own coffee in a machine that cost $40, reading 3 industry newsletters standing up at the counter, and returning a text from Owen Restrepo about a vendor invoice that's 4 days late. It is, by any honest measure, a boring morning. It has been a boring morning for 11 years. The compounding never needed excitement. It only ever needed repetition. It is 2016. You and Wes are both, roughly, worth the same amount on paper, somewhere around $600,000 in assets, minus debt. It is 2021. You are worth $61 million after your second business sale. Wes has upgraded from a BMW lease to the first Lamborghini lease and started a podcast about building generational wealth. It is 2026. This year, this beach. You are worth $412 million and ranked 7th in a city that has never heard your name. Wes is worth, by Renata's estimate, somewhere close to negative $1.5 million once the Urus and the boat financing are netted against what he actually owns. The gap didn't happen in a single moment. It happened in 11 years of small forks, each one invisible from 40 feet away, each one compounding while nobody was filming it. In 2016, if you had lined up every financial decision you and Wes made that year side by side, most of them would have looked identical. Same bank, 3 blocks apart. Same insurance company. Similar cars. The divergence didn't come from one of you being smarter in a single dramatic moment. It came from one of you choosing, over and over, in 100 small unfilmed decisions, to let money sit still instead of asking it to perform. Here is the part that doesn't fit neatly into a lesson. Marisol knows the number. She has known it since the beginning, but your brother doesn't. Your college roommate Denny, who you still talk to every few weeks, who still thinks you run a mid-sized logistics company, doing fine, doesn't know either. 2 years ago, Denny's furnace business nearly folded, and he needed $40,000 to make payroll for 6 weeks until a contract cleared. You wired it to him framed as a business loan from a friend who's doing okay, at 0 interest, and he has no idea the number in your accounts made that decision take less thought than deciding what to order at the diner. He thanked you like it cost you something. It didn't. And that gap, between what it actually cost you and what he believes it cost you, sits between you now, quietly, every time you talk. You've built a life so private that even gratitude arrives slightly wrong-shaped. This is the cost nobody puts in the caption. Not taxes, not liability. Distance. The people closest to you are operating on incomplete information, because complete information changes how people treat you, and you decided a long time ago that you would rather be loved for the wrong reasons than resented for the right ones. There's a version of that phone call where you tell Denny the truth, where you say the real number out loud and watch his face change. The way faces change on this beach when someone flips a phone around to show a stranger their balance. You have never done that. Not with Denny, not with your brother, not with either of your parents before they passed. Marisol asked you once, early in the marriage, whether you wanted to be loved for who you actually were, or for what you had, and you understood immediately that you couldn't fully test the first one without hiding the second. So you hide it, not from shame, from control. But control has a cost, and the cost is that almost nobody outside 3 rooms in your entire life has ever seen the whole picture. Your brother thinks you're comfortable, Denny thinks you're doing fine. Your kids, 11 and 14 now, know there's money for camp and college and the orthodontist, and nothing more than that, because you and Marisol agreed years ago that a number that large, handed to a child too early, tends to replace ambition instead of funding it. Winning quietly doesn't just protect you. It isolates you, one omitted sentence at a time. You've built the safest life in the city, and one of the quiet taxes on that safety is that almost nobody inside it actually knows you. The tide is coming in now. Wes has moved his filming to the bow of the boat, chasing better light. You fold the chair, the same motion you've done 1,000 times, the tape on the armrest catching slightly the way it always does, and you carry it back to the truck yourself. Nobody helps you. Nobody offers. Nobody here knows there's anything to offer help with. You could tell them. You could tell Wes right now, 40 feet of sand between you, exactly what the spreadsheet says. You won't. You never have. The chair goes in the truck bed the same way it has for 11 years, and the truck pulls out of the lot behind a man still filming himself, and nothing about the parking lot suggests which one of you the city actually belongs to. The strip of duct tape on the armrest has been replaced 4 times since you bought the chair. Once for sun damage, twice for ordinary wear, once because Marisol's father sat on it a little too hard at a cookout and laughed about it for a year afterward. Every other version of this afternoon, in every other city, ends with somebody discovering the number. This one doesn't. This one just ends with the tide coming in, and a truck pulling onto the road, and a man who could buy the beach choosing, again, quietly, not to. Consider what changes when money stops being a score you show people and starts being a wall you build around your time. When you stop paying the status tax, the leased cars, the upgraded seats, the dinners bought to keep up with people who are themselves one bad quarter away from a bank call, you stop needing validation from strangers who don't care about you anyway. The hardest part isn't making the money. The hardest part is keeping your mouth shut after you make it. Culture tells you every hour of every day that if you have something valuable, you need to broadcast it. It tells you that invisible success isn't real success, that an unphotographed life is somehow a wasted one, but the math doesn't care about the broadcast. The compounding doesn't care about the followers. When you sit in that cheap chair long enough, watching people perform for audiences that forget them by dinner, you realize something simple. The ultimate luxury was never the boat, or the watch, or the front row seat. The ultimate luxury is walking through your own city, completely unbothered, owning everything you need and needing to prove absolutely nothing. What is the one thing you would do differently tomorrow morning if nobody in the world knew how much money you had?